Joseph Dracula Guglielmo, the cousin of Roy Demeo. Okay, so let's get into Mikey Muscles, guys. I'm going to show you a lot of stuff. Over the past couple of years during this channel, speaking about this guy a couple times, I have gotten emails from people in Brooklyn who have supplied me with some cool stories in reference to this guy, Mikey Muscles. I'll show you the emails. I'm not going to put the name of the person on there. If that person's in this chat right now, I don't know. I haven't heard from these people in a while. But so I'm going to share with you some of this information. So Mikey Muscles, real name Mikey DiCarlo, but there's a little alternate stories about whether his name was Mikey DiCarlo or Michael DeMarco. And I'm going to tell you exactly why and how those stories come about. So Mikey Muscles was a guy who was around Brooklyn in the 1970s, and of course before that, but he was what you would call a known pederast. He liked to be with underage boys. And he had a lot of muscles, and apparently he had also worked out at a local gym where he would have boys there and everything else. So I just want to get this right because originally, so I'm going to show you some pieces of police files. And Ruby Almighty right there, she probably knows more about this than I do, to be honest with you. Because this comes from my friend Manny Grossman. So here's the etymology of these files. So that this thing was called Boys at the Gym was DeMarco. You see, Brandon BK, were you the one that sent me that email? Because I'm going to show it. I wasn't going to say the name, but is that you that sent me those emails? Because I cut out any emails and names. I'm just going to go over because there's been like 3 different people who have sent me emails over the past couple of years. This is from Operation Together. Now, the point of Operation Together from Rothstein was basically to they were investigating underage child sex rings, the gay bar scenes in Manhattan, and basically trafficking of youths. And there you go, Operation Together, Ruby Almighty. And yeah, so I want to show you a couple of things in particular in regards to Mikey Muscles, sometimes called Mary Muscles, sometimes called Marion Muscles. And the story goes as far as the Roy DeMeo aspect. And this is how I became friends with my friend Manny Grossman, because he was doing the Son of Sam stuff, and he put out these Rothstein files. And I'm, I was following his channel, but we weren't friends. And I was looking at all this, and then Mikey Muscles' name is. I'm like, holy shit! Look at this fucking thing, Mikey Muscles. That's the guy who Roy DeMeo killed. So, as somebody mentioned before, in May of '78, I believe it was. I think it was May of '78. The story goes that he had, I guess he kind of molested or did something to a mob affiliate's child or something, and Roy basically got the contract to kill this guy, and they would lure him to the Gemini and into the back apartment. And the story goes that he was beaten with a hammer, and Joseph Dracula, the guy that I showed you before, apparently sodomizes him with the broomstick or something of the sort. And they just basically brutalize this guy, and he ends up at the Fountain Avenue dump. Yeah. So let's look at these files real quick. Now, these files have a lot of interesting names in them. Some guys connected to the porn scene or the gay bar scene, like Ed the Skull Murphy, a very interesting guy. Nicky DiMartino, some really interesting characters. But we're just going to show you like this little tiny snippets here. So let me just open this stuff up. So there's a bunch of names that you see, guys. This is from June 23rd of 72. There's a bunch of names you see here. Larry Bachner. But the second name is the one that stood out to me when Manny released these photos. Marion Muscles, a.k.a. Mikey Muscles. Big pimp for boys. Lives on Flatbush Avenue. Drives green Volkswagen, Massachusetts plates. I don't know what's with the Mass plates. House has tight security. Keeps kids in the house at times by force. That's Mikey Muscles. Right there. He appeared in these files that Manny received, and blew my mind when I saw these a couple years ago, really. And then he also... Now, so he shows up in these files, which is very, very interesting. And he also gets mentioned another part in these files. I can't quite make sense of um what they're getting at. It appears to me that they're speaking about a murder, I believe, and I think they're trying to say that it's unlikely that he's involved. Let's see. So you get that. So right there, they refer to him as Mary Muscles, which I've heard also. More likely, a combination will be Mary Muscles, a guy by the name of Willie Dunn, a guy by the name of Weeks. They are very tight. And this is talking about a murder. This is talking about the confidential informant here is going by the name Nevada. So we don't know who the confidential informant is. And now this is from March 20th of 74. And it's just basically throughout these files, it's talking about, dealing underage children basically, and murders and suspicious murders, child sex rings, gay bars in Manhattan. Not that I'm not trying to say gays and I'm not trying to say that. It's just that's what's in these files here. And Mikey Muscles, early 70s, was appearing in police files for doing stuff with children. And very bizarre. All right, so that's the Mikey Muscles appearing in the early 1970s for pedo stuff. Wild. Now, let's get to some emails that I have received in regards to Mikey Muscles to develop more information about this character. And one of them comes from who just commented before, Brandon BK. And he says that it was him that sent one of these emails. So let's look at some of this testimony from people who. So let's see. Muscles testimony part 1. Okay. And this is, to me, this is really cool stuff. But I don't know. I hope you guys like this. But Muscles testimony part 1. Let's pull this up. This is from somebody out of Brooklyn. Okay. My story with Mikey Muscles. Well, when I was a guest around 13 to 14, they opened King's Plaza, which is on Flatbush Avenue, for those who don't know. And we would hang out there. And Mikey Muscles would be there walking around flexing. But who knew what he was really about? I mean, we were young. Anyway, one night we were at the church fair across on Flatbush Avenue. Maybe 2 blocks behind was, I think, a car dealership now. So it was my cousin Johnny, my friend Mike, and a few other kids we hung out with. Mikey Muscles was there. He came over to me and pushed me down on the table. My cousin and my friends started grabbing and pulling him, and he wouldn't let me go. My cousin Johnny's sister Connie was dating a cop who was a bodybuilder. When we told him what happened, he wanted to lay Mike out, but nothing ever came of it. Fast forward to when Murder Machine is published, I'm reading about what happened to him, and I gotta say, I cheered out loud. Anyway, that's some of growing up and living in Flatlands, Canarsie. So that is a testimony from somebody who was actually attacked by this person at King's Plaza Mall. Let's see. So Brandon's saying that's Mikey DeMarco. All right, we're going to get to Brandon's too. Now, let's see. I don't know what order, if Brandon's is going to come up first, second. So that's Mikey DeMarco. That's number 1. Now, this is going to be number 2. Now, this might be you, Brandon. I'm not too sure. Now, let's see. Okay. Hey, bud, I just watched your video with Manny Grossman, and this is in regards to Mikey Muscles. Back in the 70s in Brooklyn, my father was good friends with a tough guy by the name of Michael DiCarlo. Now, for you guys that don't know, Michael DiCarlo is the name they use in Murder Machine, who was known as Mikey Muscles. At the same time, there was another Mikey Muscles who my father knew as an acquaintance that was known to hang out with little boys. Both of them were bodybuilders, and both were killed by the Demeo crew. We believe they got their names mixed up and referred to the pedophile as Michael DiCarlo. My father believes his actual name was Michael DeMarco. I'm writing all this to you to see if you have any information about the real name in the police FBI paperwork. Thanks for the help. Also, my father has described the pedophile as tall, jacked muscles. He said he was ugly and weird looking with a flat face, thick glasses, and he was balding with a nasty comb over. That sounds disgusting. So this is already like something weird. So we're seeing names getting mixed up. We're seeing somebody, I think this is you, Brandon, I'm not sure, saying that there was 2 Mikey Muscles. All right, but it gets even better. It gets even better because this is one account right there from somebody else, right? Now check this out. Okay, guys. Now this is going to be another one. So I just showed you that one, right? This is going to be from a completely different person. All right. That's Brandon's email. All right. So this is Brandon's email. That was the one that I just read. Okay. Now check this out. This is going to be from somebody completely different. Okay. Okay. Let's check this out. Okay. Let's open this up. Mikey DiCarlo was from Bensonhurst and never ventured near Kings Plaza. He was about 5'8" tall and in good shape, a crazy son of a bitch that had been shot about 5 times. DeMarco was about 6 feet tall, roided out, and always had teenage wannabes hanging around him. Okay, what does that sound like? I used to work out at R&J Health Studio, and DeMarco would venture in from time to time. Everyone at the gym knew DeMarco was a piece of shit and was told by the owner, Jules Levine. He also made a mistake of mouthing off to a guy named Dennis Tinerino, one time Mr. America and Mr. Universe. He got smacked in the mouth. Now, here's where it gets odd. The Demeo crew definitely killed DeMarco, Mikey Muscles, but might have also killed DiCarlo as he disappeared as well and would have been seen with the younger guys. I don't believe DiCarlo was gay, but was probably killed for some other reason. Many neighborhood guys get killed. Yeah, we know that. But one described in your video is definitely not DiCarlo. I last saw DeMarco the day he got thrown out of R&J and heard later on he had disappeared. I last saw DiCarlo just prior to the Son of Sam's last shooting. So that would have been in 77, Son of Sam's last shooting. Mikey Muscles, Demeo, sodomized child pedophile, was killed in 78. But the one described in your video is definitely not DiCarlo. I'm sorry, I'll read that again. I last saw DiCarlo just prior to the Son of Sam's last shooting. He was in a car with a bunch of guys and they were hunting Son of Sam, and they all had guns. That's great. And that's the last time I saw him. One last thing you might find interesting is that another bodybuilder from that gym also got killed. I did look into the Cesar Giuliani. If you think of anything else I can help with you, just write back. So there you go, guys. There's another person telling me that in Murder Machine, that Michael DiCarlo is not Michael DiCarlo. His real name is Michael DeMarco. So what are the odds that 2 different people who don't know each other would send me these 2 exact stories? And this is like a famous story in Murder Machine. This is like one of the ones that people talk about because, he was killing a pedo, right? Now the last one that I have is, once again, I think it's the second email that I received from Brandon BK right there. He says, thanks for getting back to me. The fact that someone else is out there said the same thing is very vindicating. My father has been telling me all my life that Murder Machine has it wrong. Michael DiCarlo lived near Avenue U and Gravesend, but mostly hung out in Bensonhurst. He worked out at a no-name gym between 20th Ave and 80th and 81st Street. He was a good-looking guy, tremendous muscle. He was brutal and ruthless individual that did many bad things. The story goes that Chris Rosenberg was dealing with him, and DiCarlo was probably beating him and robbing him. This is probably one of the reasons they killed him. And yes, he was definitely killed by the Demeo crew. My father knew Michael DeMarco. He was a big guy, 6 foot tall. They were both known as Mikey Muscles and both killed by the Demeo crew on the same time. They have it down that Michael DiCarlo molested a boy, but we believe that they mixed up the names. Can you guys believe that, huh? So 2 stories from 2 different individuals saying the same exact thing. Does Murder Machine have it wrong? 30 years? Has it been wrong? I'm starting to think so. Now, the only thing that sucks is that in the Rothstein files, it doesn't have a name. It just says Mikey Muscles. That's unfortunate, but what can you do? So in just a moment, we'll get to part 2 of this upload, which is me speaking with former Roy DeMeo crew member, Pete the Pick LaFrosia. But let's first go look at some more testimony that I have received. So this one says, I grew up in Bergen Beach, Brooklyn in the 1970s. He had a gym called Pumping Iron on East 64th Street between Mill and Veterans Avenue. He always had young kids around him. He always rode a motorcycle around the neighborhood with no shirt on with a kid by the name of Anthony D, who was built like an animal. He would also be around another kid named Joey D, who was built like an animal. He had a young son and a hot-looking petite wife. I think he lived in Bergen Beach Towers at the time. One thing that sticks out in my mind is him riding his motorcycle with no shirt on and Anthony DeFranco in the back with no shirt on. Now, I don't know if he's talking about Mikey Muscles or this kid Joey D with a young petite wife, but once again, we have this conundrum with two different Mikey Muscles, but we do see the young kids and everything else. So I don't know about the wife thing. You guys, translate that however you want. Let's move on to another thing that's very, very interesting. So another source indicated to me that Mikey Muscles was connected to Scott Cafaro, who was another Roy DeMeo crew victim. Here is an article at the time of his death in 1979. And this is a description here. Motive, acquitted of rape. Victim's family members contracted Roy DeMeo. So here is what this person says. Mikey Muscles and Scott Cafaro were buddies. They were part of some Avenue L gang called The Blockbuster. Both of them killed a year apart and both supposed rapists. So more interesting things. Now we could kind of connect Mikey Muscles, based on what this person says, to another Roy DeMeo crew victim accused of doing nefarious activity. This in reference to his assault of a woman, as opposed to Mikey Muscles' supposed assaults on young boys.
I'll tell you a story about Mikey Muscles. Him and Charlie Comanche used to run together. I don't know if anybody knows him. And
hold on a second. Who did you say?
Charles Clemenza was his running partner. His
father was Charles Sr., right?
Correct. And I'm sure you know his last name by now, who he is. Well,
can I give background to who he is, Pete, before you go?
Well, that's on you. I can't stop you doing that. You're a freelancer.
No. Right. I just want people to know who he is, because he's tied into an infamous story. Clemenza, the father, Charles, was a Colombo Profaci guy. He owned the Sahara Club. Of course, that's the site where Larry Gallo gets choked out in 1961. Yeah. They took inspiration for The Godfather. So that guy owned the Sahara Club, Charles Clemenza. And you're saying that his son, Charles Jr., was partners with Mikey Muscles, correct?
Yeah. Shit.
Okay. So let's hear about it, Pete. I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt you. I just want to give back.
No. I'm glad you brought that out so these people understand what I'm going to say next,
Sure.
So I don't know what happened. But he calls me up and he tells me, ba, 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 ba. I tell him, listen, I don't care who you are. I don't know what the fuck you want, but you just back off, man. Well, we don't. I said, I don't care what you think, this is what I'm telling you. Calls back. And next thing he's telling me, I'm sitting there, my wife and my kid, we're in the living room, and listen on the phone. And he's telling me, I'm going to come there, beat your wife down, piss on your kid and stuff. And I'm listening to him. And my wife says, where you going? I walked into a workshop. I got my scubetta, which is a gun, right? Got on my motorcycle, and guess where they were? They were at Harvey's house.
Really?
Yeah, in his apartment house in Bergen Beach. So now I know they're there, right? So I said, fuck this. I said, you're going to threaten my kid and my wife? Are you fucking kidding me? You might as well put a gun in my head. I climb up the fire escape. I get in the window, right? And they weren't there, because if they were there, they weren't going to be there no more. How dare you do that? So, it got to the point where I spoke to somebody. I said, listen, go to his father. Go to his father. If it does. I went to his father, knocked on the door, and I didn't know the guy. And I told him, right? She said, how can I help you? And I explained to him who I was affiliated with at the time. He said, what's the problem? I said, listen, Mr. Clemenza, your son is running with a fucking total nut job. He's completely out of line. They don't care what they do in this neighborhood. And it's getting to the point where something's going to happen serious. But I'm not going to concern myself with that. I want to concern myself with what happened with me. And I told him the story. He says, you're kidding me. I says, Mr. Clemenza, you could check anybody. I don't bullshit like that. There's no reason in the world for me to come to your house not knowing you and telling you something like that. So he calls his son in, and he said, Charlie, I'm going to ask you one time. And Charlie was a big kid, man. He was about 6'3", about 300 pounds. Big kid.
Wow.
I'm going to ask you one time. I seen him shaking. He had a fear of his father. Shaking. He says, what, Dad? He says, did you threaten this man's kids and his wife? He says, I'm going to tell you now. You better think before you answer me. Because I believe what I just heard. That's what Charlie says. I was with, he says, I don't care who you with, that idiot. He says, that idiot made you do that? You better apologize right fucking now. And if I ever hear of anything, I don't care if this kid got struck by lightning, I'm gonna make sure you pay for it.
Wow.
And then after that, I went to school with this kid. He was a nut job.
Mikey Muscles.
Charlie Clemenza. He was a nut job.
Clemenza. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you knew that, well, two nut jobs, I guess, because he teamed up with Mikey Muscles.
What a mistake in life he made. Especially as good as his father was, that he would want that kind of repertoire following him, you know what I mean? His father would have did anything for him, you know?
Yeah.
He passed away, had a heart attack at a young age, so Charlie, so please catch up to you. Charlie had a heart attack, and the other rumor I heard was Mikey did something. He really lost his head from what I hear.
Yeah, that's what we hear.
That's what we hear.
Yeah. He's quite the polarizing character. I got a hold of some police files from a friend a couple of years ago, and the files were talking about underage children rings. Okay.
Yep.
And my friend had these files from something that had nothing to do with Roy Demeo, and he said, "Hey, look at these. Let me see if you know any names here or whatever." I noticed a couple, and then one name pops up. Mikey Muscles.
Yeah.
And that list of, underage stuff. And they also called him Mary. They referred to him as Mary Muscles for some reason. And they said, lives in Flatbush, does this kind of car, blah, blah, blah. So I thought that was really interesting to get some more insight from a detective that was just doing work, and his name had came up being involved in underage rings, if you know what I'm saying.
They would rob somebody. Right? Tied them up, and while they were there, I don't want to tell you what they did to their wife or their girlfriend. I mean,
they would assault them in a certain way, right?
That was. I just couldn't understand how he survived that long in the neighborhood. I mean, a normal guy would want to take him out, not by nobody else.
Yeah.
You shit's where you eat, and that kind of shit, you forget about it.
Yeah. And I've also received emails from random people who grew up in Canarsie who tell me about this guy. Oh, he assaulted me at Kings Plaza Mall one day. He threw me on the floor. I had to get my sister's boyfriend was a cop to go after him, and I have a couple of bizarre stories about him assaulting people randomly, beating up kids, and all types of weird stuff. But he met his demise, a just demise, I believe.
What I understand. But you got to remember something. That kid survived a lot of things. He was at a White Castle when my mother was working one night, right? And I drove up there, right, to pick my mom up from work, right? And I see this guy get shot, right, almost point blank with a 38 in the head. And he dropped to the floor. I said, "Oh, shit." I didn't really know who the hell he was at the time, right? And the bullet hit him in the head, ricocheted, went furrowed around his whole side of his head and came out there. Never entered his skull, never went through it.
Wow.
And then, I'll tell you, he did that. Now, here's another story that I can't say it's fact, but he was running a card game, right? He was a doorman at a card game, right? And the game was going on, from what I understand. A couple of guys came in to borrow the money from the card guys who were playing, take them down. And when he opened the door and he realized what was going on, he had supposedly a 45 on the shelf, and he went to get it. Before he got there, they shot him out how many times, and it fucking still lived. It was wow, that's
unbelievable. So he had a lot of lives. He was cheating death, I guess, and ultimately it caught up to him because he.
Well, if I hear the final chapter though was the end chapter. He was like the Sleepy Hollow.
He seemingly ran into guys that
didn't care.
Didn't make mistakes, I guess, when they wanted somebody. And I hate to laugh, but I've heard some bizarre stories about him, and I can't say I feel bad.
And this is what I'm talking about. Now here's these guys that are supposed to be badasses, and yet they do something like that. And what do you think the neighborhood feels? They feel more safe and more secure. These guys not running around no more. I mean, he lost his head. You know what I mean?
Well, speaking of the family thing, I want to go back to Charles Clemenza Jr. and Mikey Muscles for a second. You go to Chris Rosenberg's house because you find out they're over there.
Yeah.
Let's say you do get in there and you sneak in, and you take those guys out, and Harvey's right there. But then what?
He'd run over and give me a kiss on the mouth. That kid, that Mikey. But every time he seen Harvey, he would beat him down, take whatever you had on him.
Really?
Harvey lived in fear. I mean, it's terrible to live in fear, but he lived in fear from this guy.
It makes you wonder why he wasn't taken out sooner. Because Harvey had Roy and
shit. He was a hard guy to catch up to. I'm gonna tell you something. In the right time, in the right place. That was one of the problems. But Harvey, every time he seen that kid, he scared the hell out, put the fear of God in him. You know? And he knew he was doing it, Mikey, you know. So Chris would tell him whatever he needed to know, or give him whatever he asked him for. I don't understand. He said the same thing, Chris. But then when he got more affiliated with the Scubetas and stuff and seeing how that worked, he became a little different. At that time, he wasn't when they were up at his apartment. He was just tagging cars, you know what I mean?
Okay.
He was making money, and they knew that. That's what it was. You know?
Right,
so
right. He wasn't molded yet, I guess you could say, right?
He didn't realize the power he held in his hand.
All right, so before we go, let's go back to some intel from the streets of Brooklyn. And this is Brandon once more, who I spoke about earlier on in this upload. Brandon says, "Hey, Brett, I just watched your new YouTube video with Pete the Pick. First off, I want to let you know that I really appreciate you bringing this content and discussing Mikey Muscles. No one anywhere else is covering this topic. I would have never guessed that Pete would have known that much about Mikey. The Mikey Muscles that Pete was describing was Michael DiCarlo, who was a friend of my father's. I know this because my father told me the story about how he was shot at White Castle on 86th Street and Stillwell Avenue. Mikey told the story to my father, describing how he was down the block and saw a hit car pull up, so he ran and they started shooting at him. He ran in the zigzag pattern, a technique he was taught by his friend who was in Vietnam, and said unless you're a very good shot, it's hard to hit a moving target. Mikey said that he wasn't getting hit while he was running out, but when he tried to get inside a White Castle, he got caught up at the doors and they shot him. Mikey was shot on at least 3 different occasions and survived. If you look at the message I sent you back in 2021, I told you that I heard he was beating up Chris Harvey Rosenberg for coke. Now Pete also confirmed that. I guess it might be plausible that the murder machine did get the name right, especially since Pete was describing my father's friend, Michael DiCarlo. The Mikey Muscles that you spoke about, who was at King's Plaza, was definitely Michael DeMarco. He was known as the gay guy. They were both killed by the Demeo crew, so that's what makes this whole thing confusing. Interesting stuff once more from Brandon. Shout out, Brandon. Now, before we go, let me leave you with another piece of testimony from back on the streets of Brooklyn. This is actually from somebody completely different, and it's going to verify Pete the Pig LaFroche's story. So I'm not showing the whole email, but here is a portion of it. My father knew of Michael DiCarlo from the neighborhood, but they didn't know each other. So as my father told the story, my dad and his friend Ken stopped into the after hours for a drink. While they were inside the club, they observed DiCarlo going over to a wise guy's table. The wise guys were playing cards. They noticed the wise guys whisper something into DiCarlo's ear, and then the wise guys got up and left the club. An hour or so later, someone entered the club and pumped 3 to 5 shots into DiCarlo's stomach. My father described DiCarlo as very strong. After getting shot, they saw DiCarlo lift up the shooter by the neck. Then DiCarlo went down to the floor and the shooter left. So once more, this would pretty much confirm Pete's story of him being shot in some club. And that's basically going to end our little story here today, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed this. I know this might leave you with more questions. Well, if that's the case, well, welcome aboard. 2 things that I think we could take away from this. There was 2 Mikey Muscles in Brooklyn, both probably killed by the Roy Demeo crew. This is a piece of history that is missing. Trying to piece it together. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Please leave a comment down below. I would really appreciate that. Let's get the conversation moving forward. Thank you.